Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're totally tearing down the facade of something you've probably seen sitting in, well, nearly every convenience store on the planet. We all naturally think of Red Bull as just a beverage company, right? But as we're about to uncover in this explainer, that's a complete illusion. In reality, Red Bull is a massive, vertically integrated media and sports empire that just happens to fund itself by selling a drink. And honestly, the way they built this empire is absolutely fascinating. Let's kick this off with a really provocative question. How exactly does a tiny beverage company fund a man literally jumping from space? To wrap our heads around that, we have to look at the sheer audacity of their marketing. For years, you know their legendary slogan, Red Bull gives you wings. They tapped into this core human desire to just fly free of our responsibilities, promising their product would make it happen. Well, believe it or not, one consumer actually took that promise a bit too literally. He drank the product, didn't sprout any actual wings, and get this, he sued the company for false advertising. And the absolute wildest part of that whole story? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is he actually won. Yep, a staggering $13 million settlement. For almost any other brand out there, a payout like that for a marketing slogan gone wrong, that would be devastating. But for Red Bull, it was literally just a drop in the bucket. Because quietly, underneath that lawsuit, this company is generating a mind-bending $11.2 billion in global revenue. So how on earth are they actually doing it? Okay, let's dive into this. The entire core trick behind their operation lies right here in their margins. It costs around 9 cents to manufacture a single can of Red Bull. 9 cents. Big wholesalers buy it for about $1.87. And when you pick it up at the corner store, you're paying $3.59 or more. That is a massive 20x markup on a product the size of a deodorant bottle. It literally means that every single time one of those 9-cent cans is swiped at a register, it acts as a tiny profit bomb. Even after paying for the aluminum, the factories, and the shipping, there's just this giant mountain of cash left over to play with. Now, looking at that crazy markup, you're probably wondering, why don't they just lower their prices? I mean, a lot of people buy cheaper competitors like Monster just to get a bigger can, right? But Red Bull completely refuses to play that game. They position their drink as the premium luxury energy option. And you know what? People believed it. That premium pricing model is the actual financial engine keeping this whole machine running. If they cut their price in half tomorrow to match the competition, their entire empire would slow to a crawl. So they defend that expensive, iconic look at all costs. But here is the catch. High margins mean absolutely nothing if people don't actually want to buy your drink in the first place. So how did Red Bull make sure an entire generation was willing to pay a premium price for something that, let's be real, kind of tastes like carbonated medicine? Well, they deployed a brilliant psychological marketing strategy targeting the most influential demographic they could possibly find. Tracing this strategy over time shows exactly how they capture an audience for life. Think about it. In years 1 through 4, they targeted college campuses like a friendly intruder. They actually glued giant cans to the roofs of VW Beetles, pulled up to dorms, gyms, and libraries, and just handed out free caffeine to exhausted students. Then, in years 5 through 8, once they owned the daytime, they aggressively went after the night. Bars started mixing Red Bull with vodka and Jägermeister, turning every party into a built-in dispenser. And finally, years 9 and beyond. Those college kids graduate, right? They get real jobs. And the habit is already completely wired in. They buy Red Bull not because they're actively thinking about it, but because they've been trained for 4 years that this is what you drink when you're tired, stressed, or just trying to pretend you have your corporate life under control. They literally turned a 9-cent drink into a lifelong coping mechanism. And once they successfully captured the attention of that entire generation, they peeled back the next layer of the onion and did something no other brand dared to do. Instead of just sponsoring sports like a normal company, slapping a logo on a jersey, taking some photos, and calling it a day, Red Bull decided to just buy the entire sports world outright. The sheer scale of their assets is mind-boggling. First off, they own a Formula One racing team. That turns every single race weekend into a flashy 3-day commercial broadcast to over 100 countries. Then there's their New York soccer franchise. They bought it for $25 million, and today, it's worth around $290 million. They built the RB Leipzig and Red Bull Salzburg soccer academies from the ground up. They completely own and operate extreme sports events around the globe, from cliff diving to BMX to air racing. They've built this totally closed-loop ecosystem where kids literally grow up dreaming of playing professional sports for a beverage company. No way, right? And this brilliantly illustrates a concept best described as vertical integration, but with parachutes and engines. See, because Red Bull creates and owns these events, they control the cameras, they write the headlines, and they completely dictate the moments. Every single viral clip you see of an athlete flipping over a canyon or flying off a mountain, in reality, it's a completely unskippable ad in disguise. Competitors can't copy this because they aren't producing world-class content from inside the action. Red Bull fuels the sport, and the sport fuels the brand. But wait, despite all of those massive sporting assets, we arrive at this fascinating reality. 12 billion. Even with the F1 teams, the soccer clubs, and the extreme athletes, 90% of Red Bull's revenue still comes from one single, unchanging product, that tiny silver and blue can. Back in 2019, they sold 7.5 billion cans. Fast forward to 2023, and that number leaped to over 12 billion cans sold in a single year. To put that into perspective, most companies need a massive grocery aisle full of different products to hit numbers like that. But in stark contrast to competitors like Coke and Pepsi, who, let's face it, frantically rotate their flavors every 6 months like they're trying to win a fashion show, Red Bull just sells the exact same recipe they created back in the 1980s. Keeping the product line to basically one item makes the brand incredibly easy to remember. They keep the drink utterly simple, so they can make the media empire and the sports teams incredibly loud. Let's move to and see how this builds. Look at this split. Financially, this strategy translates to a massive dedication of resources. Red Bull strictly allocates 33%, literally 1/3 of its entire massive revenue, straight to marketing. They've essentially built a giant buy attention forever button, and they just keep pressing it over and over again. And they can afford to do this because that 67% dedicated to operations and profit is massive, all thanks to that 9-cent manufacturing cost we talked about earlier. Now we arrive at the final massive plot twist of this story. Think about this. If Red Bull is selling over 12 billion cans around the world, how do they actually get those billions of cans into the hands of consumers? Managing the physical nightmare of global shipping, trucks, and warehouses, that would eat up all those profits in a heartbeat. Well, they have a secret weapon. I like to call it borrowing the neighbor's Ferrari. There's a totally brilliant divide at play here. On one side, we have what Red Bull fiercely owns and controls, the media and the sports teams. On the other side, we have what they completely outsource, global logistics. Instead of spending billions trying to build their own shipping empire, Red Bull simply partnered with Coca-Cola. They tapped into one of the biggest, most unparalleled distribution networks on the planet. This allows Red Bull to slide right into almost any store, bar, or vending machine without having to build the infrastructure themselves. They are literally borrowing Coke's Ferrari and only paying for the gas. The sheer scale of this reach is what makes them practically untouchable. Because of this logistics partnership, Red Bull is available in over 170 countries. In North America alone, the product seamlessly moves through 27 US states and 3 Canadian provinces, operating through 180 warehouses that handle half the region's volume. This proves that Red Bull's true dominance isn't just flashy marketing. It's built on a completely unbeatable distribution system. A new energy drink brand might taste amazing, it might look cool, but if it can't magically get into 170 countries and 180 warehouses overnight, it simply isn't a threat to Red Bull. So the crucial point is this. Red Bull did not win the energy drink war because they invented the best tasting beverage. Not at all. They won because they built the smartest, most ruthless business model in the world. They take a 9-cent can, sell it at a massive premium, use that pure profit to hijack global sports and media, and then distribute the whole thing using their rival's network. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to ponder. The next time you grab one of those little silver and blue cans off the shelf, are you really just paying for a drink, or are you funding an entire empire? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, stay curious.